Okay, picture this. Imagine a struggling family walking into a therapist's office. Tensions are incredibly high, communication is totally breaking down, and it's just obvious that everyone in the room is hurting. Now, if you're the counselor, how in the world do you decide which psychological theory to apply when there are just so many options out there? Well, welcome to this explainer. We're going to dive right in and explore how Dr. James Robert Bitter's textbook, Theory and Practice of Couples and Family Counseling, tackles this exact dilemma. And the way he does it is brilliant. He uses one continuous case study to help us road test 13 different therapeutic lenses.
Here is what we're going to cover today. First, shifting to systemic thinking. Second, meeting the Quest family. Third, early systemic models. Fourth, the postmodern paradigm shift. Fifth, evidence-based approaches. And finally, building an integrative lens.
All right, Section 1, shifting to systemic thinking.
Before we even meet our family, we have to understand a fundamental paradigm shift in the counseling world. We're talking about the massive leap from looking at just the individual to looking at the entire system. You know, an individual counselor typically tries to find a diagnosis in isolation. They're laser focused on the self, internal coping mechanisms, maybe slapping a specific DSM-5 classification on it. But a systemic practitioner, they zoom way out. They're looking at the entire web of transactions. They literally invite the whole family into the room because they believe, down to their core, that a problem only really makes sense when you look at it within the context of those relationships.
Moving right along to Section 2, meet the Quest family.
So to really see this systemic therapy in action across vastly different theories, we need a constant, right? We need an anchor. The author brilliantly created the Quests. They're a fictitious but honestly super realistic, blended multicultural family. By applying 13 different theoretical lenses to the exact same complex family dynamic, we get this perfect apples to apples baseline. We get to see exactly how swapping out the lens totally changes the way a therapist interacts with the Quest's specific cultural backgrounds and their blended stepfamily challenges.
Which brings us to Section 3, early systemic counseling models. If we trace the evolution of family therapy, we've got to start in the mid-20th century with the absolute legends, early pioneers like Adler, Minuchin, and Haley. These are the practitioners who initially built the bedrock of systemic therapy, pulling from object relations, structural frameworks, and strategic interventions. Now, if the Quests walked into the office of one of these early pioneers, the therapist would firmly act as the absolute expert in the room, hunting for the core essence of the family's dysfunction. Like a structural therapist might look at the blended Quest family and immediately try to fix the hierarchy between the biological parents, the step-parents, and the kids. A strategic therapist, though, they might focus intensely on negative interaction sequences, maybe even pulling out a wild tactic like counter-paradox. That's where you literally tell the Quests to intentionally keep failing at their communication to purposefully provoke a rebellion that forces change. Crazy, right? It was definitely a time of bold, expert-led interventions aimed squarely at fixing pathology.
Let's jump to Section 4, the postmodern paradigm shift. Fast forward into the 1990s and boom, the field experiences a massive philosophical earthquake. The postmodernists step onto the scene and fundamentally disrupt everything. They completely throw out the idea that a family has one objective, measurable essence that some expert therapist needs to diagnose and fix. Instead, they realize something huge. Knowing a family depends just as much on the perspective of the observer. In the therapeutic room, reality is co-constructed. Basically, if you swap out the therapist, you get an entirely different version of the Quest family.
Under this postmodern lens, using models like solution-focused or narrative therapy, the therapist isn't the boss, they're a collaborator. Rather than pathologizing the Quest's blended dynamic, they completely orient toward the future. Imagine asking the Quests the famous miracle question. Hey, if you woke up tomorrow and your cultural misunderstandings were just magically solved, what would your morning look like? It completely flips the script from pathology to possibility, empowering the family to co-author a brand new story together.
Next up is Section 5, evidence-based practice approaches.
All right, welcome to the 21st century. Our lens shifts once again. As highlighted in the newest edition of Dr. Bitter's textbook, modern managed care facilities demand evidence-based practices. They want pragmatic, measurable approaches that directly address actions and actually solve problems efficiently. But here's the good news, the field didn't just regress to the old days of pointing out dysfunction. And here is the beautiful twist. Modern evidence-based practice focuses heavily on resiliency. Instead of asking, what's broken in the Quest family, this lens asks, what incredible strengths have the Quests already shown while under all this stress? It's all about recognizing the family's inherent capacity to heal, to grow, and to leverage the awesome skills they already have in their toolbox. Using highly researched models like John Gottman's Science of Couples or Susan Johnson's Emotionally Focused Therapy, this modern lens zooms right in on the parents. By building real emotional safety and secure attachment between the partners, the therapist creates this incredibly stable foundation that just naturally ripples out to secure the blended stepchildren. They explore those deep childhood wounds and foster functional interdependence because they know for a fact that a secure couple creates a secure family system. Finally, Section 6, Building an Integrative Lens. So after exploring all these different eras, philosophies, and models, what's the ultimate goal? Well, the absolutely crucial takeaway is this: you cannot separate the person from the professional. In systemic therapy, you are literally the primary instrument of change. A therapist absolutely has to do the hard work of exploring their own family of origin triggers and unfinished business. If they skip that step, they seriously risk projecting their own personal baggage onto vulnerable clients like the Quests. Personal development isn't just some nice-to-have bonus. It's a mandatory prerequisite to being effective.
By taking all these different theories and mashing them together, a practitioner develops what we call meta-frameworks. Think of these like a rich, multi-layered master blueprint. By simultaneously understanding things like organization, culture, gender, and development, a therapist can custom tailor their interventions to the highly unique, specific ecology of whoever happens to walk in their door, just like the rich, multicultural background of our Quest family.
Honestly, this quote perfectly summarizes everything we've been talking about. There is simply no single right way to do family practice. There's no grand claim to absolute truth. There are only different perspectives that endlessly challenge you, change you as a person, and completely enlarge your view of life and human connection. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. Imagine the Quest family is sitting in your waiting room right now, carrying all their blended, multicultural complexities. Which of these 13 lenses would you reach for first? Would you look to fix their structure? Would you co-construct a totally new narrative? Or would you focus entirely on their resiliency? Think about it, because the lens you choose says just as much about your worldview as it does about theirs. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring those perspectives.